But yeah, oh yeah. So what really drew me into it was when I'm watching that Contender Series, I'm looking at these people getting kicked in the legs, and I'm like, imagine getting kicked in the leg. Like that has to
Dude,
hurt
I think
so
there should be more of it. Whenever I watch
Right,
UFC,
yeah.
I'm like,
Somebody won because the other fighter bit them.
what? They did a Tyson, dude, and someone's leg is so far in front of them. I'm like, why don't people kick?
This like crazy wrestler is showing that he says he wants to go to the UFC.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Pins and Punches podcast on TrueTan Wrestling. I'm your co-host, Tanner McHugh, aka TrueTan Wrestling, the wrestling expert, joined by my co-host, Josh Derrick, aka ASAP Joshy, the UFC and movie expert. The main point of this podcast is just for two buddies to catch up week over week, but also to educate each other. Me, I want to be educated more on the UFC, obviously, and get back into movies, and then hopefully I can educate Josh about traditional wrestling. So when those great stars from NCAA wrestling start getting into the UFC, he has a little better grasp who they are and even better storylines. But overall, before we get into all that wrestling stuff, Josh, how the heck are you doing, man?
Oh, better than ever.
Awesome.
Yeah, the last time that we saw it, since the last time we saw each other, not much has changed, but just watching a lot of movies, watching a lot of fights, and love doing it.
It was my wedding, right? Last time we saw each other.
Yep.
Oh, nice. Dude, when we were hanging out that night, and you drove back to your motel or hotel, did you end up watching a movie? I know you said you were thinking about it.
No, I didn't. I was pretty tired that night, so yeah, I crashed pretty much right away. And then after the wedding, gave some people a ride to the bar, and then I went back to the hotel and watched the UFC card that I missed. So that was yeah.
So again, for the people out there, Josh, huge UFC expert, watches the Dana White Contender Series, watches the UFC cards, obviously. Do you watch the Dana White's in a slap bet, or what's it called?
Yeah,
it's like a slap card?
Power slap. Yeah, no, I don't watch that. I don't want to say anything disparaging to it because it's people must watch it.
It's just different. Yeah,
he's promoting it so much, but yeah, not a fan. I don't think there's as much competition. I think what I like about fighting the most is that it is, it's like wrestling, where it is kind of the rawest form of sport, where it's one man versus one man or one woman versus one woman, just locked in a cage or on a mat, and it's only them, and it's just their bodies. It's not a ball sport. It's not like pool or anything like that. That's why I have a deep appreciation for the art of fighting.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the only thing with the slap league that I can really see is it can give people like you or me that weren't alive I don't think we were, when UFC first came around, like
93.
I'm sure like it wasn't even that, like there wasn't a lot of competition. I'm sure it was like really rough sailing in the beginning.
Yeah, you had those people who dominated because they had that advanced skill set in a certain field, like the Gracies, and basically brought jiu-jitsu to the mixed martial arts stage. And then you have these guys who just know how to knock people out better than anybody else. And then as time went on, I mean, even now especially, you see a lot of these fighters that are in their early 20s, some even in their late teens, where the skill level is so high for their age that by the time they're reaching the prime of their careers, I think we're going to see a complete evolution within the next 10 years of the fight game.
Really? You think it's going to evolve that much more, like in 10 years? Because it's already at a really high level. I don't watch it much, but from what I do watch.
Yeah, you have fighters like Raul Rosas Jr., who joined the UFC at 17. Now he's 19. Only has one loss, and that came to Christian Rodriguez, who hands out losses to undefeated fighters like they're candy. Beat Raul Rosas Jr., beat Cameron Simon, and although he did beat Isaac Dulgarian, I scored the fight for Isaac Dulgarian. I think he got robbed in that fight, but nonetheless, he took the 0 from 3 fighters in the UFC. So Christian Rodriguez is the real deal. But to the point, you're going to see this evolution just because of how young these fighters are when they're getting to the UFC. So they're going to be fighting the best of the best relatively early in their career. And by the time they're reaching the prime of their careers, where they're fighting for championships or fighting like high-level contender fights, you're going to see that evolution.
No, that's really cool. And we'll kind of get into Bo Nickal a little later when we talk current events in the UFC world. But I feel like someone like him it's really weird. You're saying they're getting in a little younger and from an outsider's point of view, I just think it takes so long. Like, that's just different from wrestling in my world. Like in college wrestling, you could have 2 good weekends and you're in the top 5 in the country, where UFC, and I get it, you get punched or kicked in the knee and your knee dislocates. It's not like you can jump back the next week.
Yeah.
But how long would you say, like just a generic person who keeps winning some unprofessional fights and then slowly, like how long do you think it would take to get a title fight for just like a traditional person that talks, I don't know, maybe medium level smack talk, like 10 years, do you think it could take?
Well, for some fighters, it can take that long. You have some like Alex Pereira where he's one of the biggest stars in the UFC right now. You had the storyline where he had wins over the current champion at the time, Israel Adesanya. So you had that storyline where they're trying to fast track this guy to get him to fight Izzy as soon as possible. And he just kept winning. I got to see him knock out Sean Strickland in person, which was incredible.
Oh, for real?
But yeah, so yeah, oh yeah. It was,
where was that at? Where was that at?
Vegas.
Oh, wow. You went out to Vegas to watch
it?
Dude, that's pretty awesome. Was it everything you imagined?
Oh, yeah. It's incredible. Like when somebody gets knocked out, I mean, everybody's cheering in the room when you're watching it on TV. But when you hear the reaction of a crowd to a massive knockout or just a crazy win in general, that aura is just something else. But to answer your question about how long it could take to get into that title conversation, if you're just a guy, like you don't have any backstory in terms of you have like history with a current fighter or something like that, like Alex Pereira, if you keep winning, that's all that matters. If you could have a guy, I don't know numbers off the top of my head, but there are some guys like Steve Erceg who, now granted, the flyweight division isn't as deep as other divisions, but Steve Erceg got a title shot relatively early in his UFC career, and he had it, but he even identified it himself. He made one crucial mistake in the fight that I think lost him the 5th round and eventually, lost him the fight, which was sad to see. I'd like to see more fighters like from Australia, some countries that don't have, you have Volk, but countries that don't have as many champions, I always like seeing them get to raise a belt. Like when Brandon Moreno was the first Mexican champion at flyweight, that was
a couple of years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah. That was one of my favorite title fights ever.
He got kicked out like 2 years before it. Didn't he get kicked out of the UFC and then he got back in? See, that's what I'm talking about. Because I think I work for this company where we track sponsorships, and that was probably the only time in my life I was into UFC. So I watched that fight. And I just remember thinking it takes so long to build up. So it blew my mind. This guy got kicked out of the UFC. So he's not even ranked, because what do they rank? Like top 20 normally at a weight, top 15. So he wasn't kicked out. So obviously wasn't ranked. And then somehow got a title fight. Like, I mean, I'm not a big fan, but I don't blame that for being like one of your favorites, because that's a crazy storyline. Yeah,
it's great to see. And he had 4 fights with Davis and Figueiredo. I think it was Figgy won the first fight, Moreno won the second, or they drew, like there was a draw in there. It was a crazy quadrilogy. I think it was the only quadrilogy in UFC history, if I'm not mistaken.
Is he still in it? What's his name? This is how bad. What's his name again? All I know is he's from Mexico.
Oh, Brandon Moreno.
Moreno. Is he still in it?
Oh yeah. Yeah. He lost to, I think it was Brandon Royval. You're gonna have to check me on that. If I'm wrong, edit that out. But
cut that.
But now Brandon Royval, who I got to meet in person in Vegas, he's a super cool dude. Out of all the fighters that I met, he was absolutely the most like real person. I think I met, who was it? The Italian dude, Marvin Vittori. Marvin Vittori looked hungover. He didn't really seem like he wanted to be there, but Royval was talking to us like we were buddies. Like it was really cool to see him. He lost the title, or he lost a title fight to Pantoja, Alejandro Pantoja. And now he's fighting undefeated Japanese rising prospect Tatsuro Taira, and that's going to be a title eliminator for flyweight. So that's going to be a really cool matchup, because Brandon Royval has been in there with the best of the best. He's beat some of the best, and Tatsuro Taira has just been on an absolute tear. He's undefeated. So
where's he from? Is it Japan? Oh, yep. Okay, yeah. Yep. Is Japan do they usually have some good fighters in the UFC, or?
There have not. I don't think there's been a Japanese champion in the modern UFC. They don't have a lot of representation at the top, but fighters like him, the names are escaping me, but they do have some like really promising rising prospects. And that's even talked about, like when you'll see some interviews with Tatsuro Taira where he's saying, I want to be that Japanese representation. We don't have enough of that in the UFC. And for a nation with such a deep rooted history in martial arts, you want to see that represented on the biggest stage in martial arts. So it'd be cool to see. I am gonna be rooting for Royval. I met him. He's a cool guy, and he's been one of those fighters that I watched from like my early fandom in the UFC. So have that attachment to him, but would not be disappointed to see Tatsuro Taira win that. And if he does win that, I certainly want to see him win the title.
Yeah, it's Japan's kind of on a heater right now in wrestling. They're doing some really awesome. I mean, they've, like you said, martial arts and wrestling, they're always really solid. I guess just inconsistent, but the Olympics, they balled out. I think so. There's 3 different styles in the Olympics: Greco, women's, and then freestyle. So there's 3 times 18 different weight classes. I think they won 11 gold medals, and I think they had like 12 medalists in total, something like that. So they just really balled out. Women's wrestling, they always do, but the men just really showed up. Like dudes who no one thought was going to win ended up beating dudes that were coming off a world title. So Japan's doing something right. I've been trying to do some research on their wrestling, like practices for coaching or just maybe future documentaries for TrueTan Wrestling. And dude, it's just Japan's doing something right. Dude, what's something I always wanted to get into for some reason was sumo wrestling, because
it looks incredible.
In regular wrestling, like their heavyweights, like the heavier it goes, normally the worse like their team gets. So their lightweights super good, like really quick, do some really amazing technique. But then the heavier they go, they just don't, like, they didn't even have a heavyweight qualifier for the Olympics. And a lot of people just say when you get to a certain point, they just go straight sumo, which I mean, is like, it's kind of like NFL and wrestlers. It's like, if you can go to the NFL, 9 out of 10 wrestlers are going to do it just because of the pay. Probably same with UFC. Right. But it's crazy. And another thing you said that really resonates with me is I'll have, like, I'm a big Penn State wrestling fan or Lehigh wrestling, so I'll always root for them, Pennsylvania roots. But if there's like a school like that doesn't get a lot of praise, like a wrestler from Japan, or fighter from Japan you mentioned, dude, it's so hard not to root for them because you want to witness history, right? It's awesome. Yeah. When did you start watching UFC and getting really into it? Were you into it in high school? I don't really remember it too much.
No, it was during COVID. It was the only sport that was on. So, and funny enough, I didn't even watch a UFC card first. The first thing I watched was Contender Series, and I had no idea what it was. I just saw Dana White. I'm like, oh, UFC. And then when I clicked on it, I was like, wait a minute, like, is this UFC? Like what's going on here? Because like they're not saying that it's like a UFC fight. But then once I watched it for a little bit, I'm like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. They fight to get a contract to get into the UFC. And what really hit it for me was I'm watching this, and the guy in the main event, his name was Joe Pyfer. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He's a fighter out of Philly.
That sounds super familiar, that name.
Yeah, he's out of he's out of Philly, trains with Sean Brady, who just beat Gilbert Burns at one of the more recent cards. But he was the main event on that Contender Series card, the first martial arts thing that I ever watched, and he got picked up by Dustin Stoltzfus, thrown and snapped his arm backwards. And when I watched that, I was disappointed because I heard he's from Philly. I'm like, oh, I want this guy to win. Then I see his arm get snapped backwards. I'm like,
his arm, bro.
I'm like, God damn. But well, he's one of my favorite stories in the UFC because he came back. I forget if it was the next year or 2 years later, because I know he had to, rehab a pretty gnarly injury. But he ended up getting a sick knockout, and he went on a crazy crazy finish streak in the UFC. He just lost his first UFC fight to Jack Hermanson, who's been around. He's one of the like gatekeepers of the division. That was going to be the fight that was really going to propel Joe Pyfer, but just a setback. I think he really has a chance to do something really great in the division, and especially such a gnarly division like middleweight. I mean, that is a murderer's row. But yeah, So what really drew me into it was when I'm watching that Contender Series, I'm looking at these people getting kicked in the legs, and I'm like, imagine getting kicked in the leg. like that has to
Dude,
hurt.
I think there should be more of it. Whenever I watch UFC, I'm like, kick, like, I don't know if it's like in baseball, there's those dumb unwritten rules like don't hit the ball when you have three ball, like don't literally hit the ball when there's three balls or whatever. I don't know, but sometimes I'm watching a UFC card and someone's leg is so far in front of them. I'm like, why don't people kick like more often? Like I'm always like, is it an unwritten rule that things change? But whatever, go on.
Well, no, it's funny you bring that up because Mike Bisping, former middleweight champion, he commentates the fights. First UK champion. He said that when he was in the UFC, people didn't really kick legs. And then once he came to like near the end of his career and after he retired, he noticed a lot more leg kicks. And they say it hurts so goddamn bad that it's like, why weren't people doing this earlier? Like, it's not an unwritten rule. Like people, like you'll see some people get their legs absolutely battered. There have been
especially in the early days, right? Wasn't it a lot more brutal in the early days?
Yeah, I mean that was like the no holds bar era where it was no biting and no eye gouging were the only rules. So it's like,
I'm surprised biting wasn't allowed even.
Funny enough, that just happened a few cards ago. Somebody won because the other fighter bit them.
What, they did a Tyson dude? They tried to bite him?
He bit him like on his arm somewhere, and that fighter immediately got cut. The fighter who got bit it was Dana White called it, I got fucking bit bonus. So that was so he got an extra bonus for that.
Dude, Dana White's the man, isn't he?
I love him. And that fighter got the bite mark tattooed. Like it was, you could see it. It was like a real deep teeth imprint. And after the fight, he got it tattooed onto him forever. Sick. Yeah. So no biting. Not a good idea.
It's just wild. It's just wild. So you want to get into some current events and everything? Talk about Dana White Contender Series. Talk about Bo Nickal making a return.
Yeah. So Bo Nickal has a massive step up in competition. So his last fight.
Can you just kind of, so from my perspective, in the wrestling world, like I get a lot of info from wrestling Twitter and insiders I talk to, text here or there, and a big thing is a lot of people say Bo Nickal's only fought like bums. So can you kind of talk about like, has he had like a pretty serious fight yet? I know he hasn't really been tested, but like you say is a big jump, but has he even been tested yet?
So his UFC debut was against a guy named Jamie Pickett, and he's no longer in the UFC. He was never anything crazy. He had some wins. He had some losses.
Yeah, and I get you got to work your way up. Like I understand that part.
And I think Bo Nickal made his UFC debut at 3-0 or 4-0.
I know, like it's crazy.
It was. I think he made his Contender Series debut at 1-0. I think he got a really quick knockout in his first pro fight, and then when he got a 1 minute finish on the Contender Series, and Dana was like, we're going to bring you back later on this season because we can't sign you to the UFC at 2-0.
Do you think it was because he was such a well-known wrestler, or?
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about him, because I was introduced to Bo Nickal before it was announced that he was going to be on the Contender Series, because it was big news in the MMA space that this crazy wrestler is showing that he says he wants to go to the UFC. And I knew nothing about him, but then I did a little bit of research and I'm like, okay, 3-time national champion, this guy's the real deal. But what I wanted to ask you is, it was surprising, seeing such someone who's relatively green to MMA get that fast track to the UFC. I mean, nobody gets on the Contender Series at 1-0, 2-0. I mean, the lowest you usually see is 4-0, 5-0, or they might have 4 or 5 wins. What about Bo Nickal made him so special? Because there's been countless incredible wrestlers, What about him made him so special that once he showed just that much, I mean, he did get a knockout, he didn't even use his wrestling in his first MMA fight. What about him made the MMA community be like, we need this guy?
I don't know. I think I'm a big person on timing, and I think that's just what it was. So one thing about Penn State guys, there's one guy that I'm sure we'll eventually talk about that. So the Penn State mold is pretty, they're kind of shrouded around secrets. No one knows how they develop guys to become, they get the great recruiting classes, don't get me wrong, but some of these dudes turn out to be projected to be maybe 1-time national champs their senior year to 3-4 timers, stuff like that. And biggest thing is they're just such nice people. That's the biggest thing and biggest change right now from just gritty to really nice people that are having fun wrestling. And so Bo Nickal didn't really talk a lot of smack, or at least I don't remember a ton. I remember he used to talk like there was this one really big penny guy in the national finals over an Ohio State guy when Ohio State almost beat Penn State. And he talked a little bit, but it wasn't trash. It was just like, I'm pumped up, like I won this for my team, stuff like that.
That's what we do.
And then I think when his Olympic career, he was done pursuing that, I think he just got right on social media, kind of built a good team around him. And the crazy part is there's been a lot of great wrestlers. But one thing that I notice is sometimes there's really good wrestlers and there's people like Bo Nickal. And I feel like right now, Olympic athletes, they can get paid pretty dang well out of college. So they don't have to jump right into the UFC like it's Michael Chandler. Was he? Yeah, like Michael Chandler was pretty dang good, but he couldn't get paid a lot in the UFC. Same with like Ben Askren. That's why he went in the one championship and stuff. They had the credentials, but they had to jump right into it. Where Bo Nickal, he just had the credentials behind him. I think the social media timing really helped out. I think he kind of just knows how to work the system. And to be honest, the biggest thing, I think no one really saw the knockout power because he is a wrestler. And he talked about it a little bit on Joe Rogan and stuff. And he just really trains that. And it's crazy that someone like that might have been punching their whole life. He can compete with those guys right now. Well, supposedly. But I think it's just that punching power and timing, dude. That's just kind of the only thing I can guess. And he just knows the right people, which is just kind of the secret of life, I guess, knowing the right people.
So in his 3 UFC fights, he had Jamie Pickett, who was like, you know, it was like your welcome to the UFC moment. It's like, if you could hang with this guy, then, you know, you might be going somewhere.
Yeah.
If you can't get past this guy, you might not be ready for this level yet.
Yeah, it might take a couple years instead of the fast track he's on.
Right. And then his second fight was against a guy named Val Woodburn. Now, what happened with him was, I forget who Bo Nickal was originally supposed to face, but I think somebody pulled out, and Val Woodburn, he made his UFC debut against Bo Nickal.
Was this the dude everyone was saying he was cutting grass like that day or something?
Yeah, okay. He was. I think he owned a landscaping business.
Yeah, that dude got a lot of heat, and I was like, man, like this dude put his foot on the line. Like,
well, seriously, I mean, like you're making your UFC debut, but it's that all risk, like all reward. I mean, if you beat Bo Nickal, you know, this major rising star, you have immediately punched your ticket to relative stardom in the sport. But that was where a lot of the criticism came. It's like, okay, he crushed Jamie Pickett, who a lot of people would call a can. I wouldn't, but you know, that was, you can see people saying that. Val Woodburn, who never had a fight in the UFC prior to that. He did get another fight in the UFC after that, but he lost to Obon Elliott. And then Bo Nickal's last fight against Cody Brundage. The thing about that fight is Cody Brundage is a really serviceable fighter. He's another one, has some wins, has some losses, but he is a wrestler. So it was like, let's put Bo Nickal up against not only a guy who has a lot of UFC experience, but a guy who is a wrestler. Not that he could match his skill set, but you know, MMA is MMA.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But Bo Nickal got through him, and I think going from Cody Brundage to somebody like Paul Craig, that is a massive step. Because Paul Craig is a guy, he's the only loss on Magomed Ankalaev's record, and he submitted him with 1 second left in the fight, which is, I believe, with a triangle, if I'm not mistaken.
This is Bo Nickal's next fight. This is who he has his
next fight? Bo Nickal's next fight. Yeah, I forget the card, but I forget like what number it is, or I think it's the John Jones Stipe Miocic card.
Yeah, it's a big one. Yeah, dude, that's another crazy thing. I mean, we've said it. Dana White's the man, and I was listening to him on some podcast recently, and he was just saying, like he's just really good at like knowing like when someone's going to be a star. I mean, obviously there's the McGregor story, like he knew right away, but he just has to see something in Bo Nickal because wasn't his last fight on a pretty big card, and he got on the main card too, which is wild.
That was another thing. Like a lot of, I guess what you would call casual fans are wondering, you know, why is this guy who has 2 fights on the main card?
Yeah.
I'll tell you why.
UFC
Because
309, by the way.
yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Yep. That is the John Jones card, right?
Oh, wow. I'll find out in a sec. Yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. You
Yeah.
think Stipe's got a chance? We'll bet.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
sweet.
when
I
we're
lived in
talking,
Cleveland, so we
yeah,
rep
yeah,
Stipe a little bit.
yeah. A lot of, I mean, anybody's going to get counted out against John Jones, who's considered by many to be the GOAT of the sport.
Yeah.
Especially with Stipe's age, his long layoff. He's coming off of a knockout loss, but he's also known as the greatest heavyweight of all time. So the fight does make sense. And this is coming from a Tom Aspinall fan. I really want to see Tom Aspinall fight John Jones. I really want to see Tom Aspinall fight John Jones so bad. But yeah, no, I would not count Stipe out. With that being said, I hope John Jones wins because I hope he sticks around for one more fight because I really want to see him fight Tom Aspinall.
Why do you want to see that so bad? Can you see? I don't even know who that is.
Tom Aspinall is my favorite fighter in the UFC. He's the current interim heavyweight champion. He defended the interim belt, which I'm not a fan of. If you have the interim belt, I think what that says is your next fight should be for the undisputed belt.
Yeah.
A lot of people echo that sentiment, but
yeah, it seems like a weird method, but yeah.
Right. And the main reason is because John Jones got hurt. I think he tore his pec, and they rescheduled the same fight. Yeah, rough. But so I get it. I get why they have to continue with this. You have to give Stipe this fight because what other fight are you going to give Stipe? So
yeah.
But the problem is going to be two things. If Stipe wins, he's not fighting Aspinall. He's going to win that belt and he's going to retire without question. If John Jones wins, there's a chance he retires as well. And he said that he's most likely going to retire after that. But then Dana contradicted that by saying if John Jones wins, he will fight Aspinall. So Tom Aspinall, he has been running through guys in the UFC like crazy. His only loss in the UFC was he threw a leg kick against Curtis Blades and tore his knee a minute into the fight.
Wait, so he kicked him and his knee tore from his kick? Oh, wow.
Yep. Yeah. So
that's crazy at heavyweight too, because I feel like they don't cut a lot of weight. Like you see less injuries, but yeah, anything can happen.
Yeah. So yeah, and his only loss before that, I know he has a similar loss like John Jones where he got DQ'd for illegal elbows. So he might have one loss early in his career, but
what's an illegal elbow? Like you could do it to the back of the head.
You can't
you
down
can't
like that.
So it's like this. If I'm on top of you, I can do this. I don't even know if that's
you can go from the side, but you can't like drop your elbow like that.
Okay.
I think they're changing the rule though. I think
wow.
that rule is going to get changed. I mean, dude, it's an elbow. It's going to hurt. Whether you're coming from the side or getting dropped down. I heard Joe Rogan say that the reason why it was illegal is because they saw people break cinder blocks like this. But it's really? Like, I don't know the real reason behind it, but I just know that is one of Tom Aspinall's losses, and his only loss in the UFC is due to a freak injury. But he did get his lick back against Curtis Blades by knocking him out in a minute in their last fight. It
sounds like an animal.
He's an absolute beast. I mean, he runs through people. He has the shortest octagon time of any UFC fighter, I'm pretty sure. I think he's had I think I saw the numbers might be a little off, but I think he has been a professional mixed martial artist for 9 years and has 40 minutes of octagon time.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, he runs through people like they're paper. So that's why I want to see him fight John Jones, because I think if there's one person in the entire UFC that could beat John Jones, it's Tom Aspinall.
Yeah.
And I would put Tom Aspinall up against anyone in the world. I think he is the pound for pound greatest fighter in the world right now. The only other person that is in that conversation, contrary to what Dana White will tell you, is Islam Makhachev. He is the current pound for pound number one, the lightweight champion. But I think Tom Aspinall, given more opportunities to shine, he will not only get that number one pound for pound spot, but hold it for quite a while.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say. Aspinall probably just doesn't have it because of the just lack of resume right now.
Yeah, he I don't know when he made his debut, but I think the first fight I watched him, I think it was his second fight in the UFC.
When was Stipe's last fight even? I'm trying
2 years ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was a while. Who did he lose to? It was
He got knocked out by Francis Ngannou.
Oh yeah. It wasn't pretty either, was it?
Oh, it was brutal.
What's he up to? Did he lose to your boy?
Ngannou?
Yeah.
No, they never got to fight. After Ngannou won that belt against Stipe, he defended it against Cyril Gane, and then negotiations fell through for him to stay with the promotion, and he ended up signing with the PFL. But before that, he had the boxing fights where I watched the fight again, I watched the highlights of the fight against Tyson Fury, and I thought Ngannou won that fight, and then he got he get knocked? Who did he fight? Anthony Joshua? I don't watch boxing.
I'm the bad co-host for this, so I'm like,
I don't watch boxing.
That's the whole point of the podcast, I guess, is for me to learn more about UFC and you to learn more. So I'm these early ones, the questions. We're just gonna have to guess.
we'll iron it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I that's another fight that I wish I would have got to see, because what I'm excited for is, after that injury with Aspinall, it was for being an Aspinall fan, it was a really rough layoff, because you know how much potential this guy has, and he just has to sit and rehab this injury. And he even talked about on the Believe You Me podcast with Bisping, he talked about how dark of a place you go into when you have that type of injury and you're questioning yourself, whether you're going to be able to recapture that or. And then when he came back, he fought Marcin Tybura and knocked him out pretty soundly, and it was just such a beautiful sight to see. And when you bring up things like, did he fight Ngannou? No, but just saying that out loud, I would have loved to see that. Any of these big fights, like being a fight fan, especially when you're a fan of a particular fighter, the layoffs are just horrible. They're just torturous. I mean, even between fight, a fighter maybe will fight 3 or 4 times a year if they're active.
Yeah.
4 is crazy. If you're getting 4 fights in a year, you
mentioned the PFL. That's basically what they do, like 4, right?
Yeah,
because it's a season.
Right.
I actually kind of like how that system is.
Yeah, so do I. I don't watch the PFL as much as I would like to.
They used to have a ton of wrestlers. They had like 3 wrestlers at one weight once. I think it was a Palmer, Bubba Jenkins, who was a Penn State and Arizona State guy, and then I think someone else, but I could be wrong. But yeah, PFL, it's I wish they kind of did that for like the lower rank guys in the UFC to like kind of make them move up faster, or at least or something. But I get why the UFC does it the way they do. But yeah, that's just one of the reasons I never got into it, because I'm used to, heck, I could see some of my favorite wrestlers 10 times in a month or something. But again, I get it. It's not, there's no punches in the kind of wrestling I like to watch. So
yeah, one of the major rule changes between the UFC, or rule differences between the UFC and the PFL, is there's no elbows allowed in the PFL, which saves you a lot of cuts, a lot of blood, a lot of. Yeah, so because if you get a gnarly cut from an elbow,
I guess I never would have thought of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that allows the fighters to have a quicker turnaround, because you take much less damage to the face. Because it's like, you get a gnarly injury like a knee injury or a broken bone. That's rehab. But if you get cut in the face, that's another thing you have to, it's not a broken bone, but you still have to rehab it. So the next time you step in, you don't open it up again. And fighters, Charles Oliveira had to pull out of the fight because he got cut like a cut above his eye, like a few days or a few weeks before the fight. That was just devastating. But but yeah, so that I think allows the PFL fighters to have a quicker turnaround. But I like elbows.
Yeah,
you see a nice elbow, it's one of the more satisfying strikes.
Yeah, I know. That is one thing. When someone hits like such a nice kick where you hear that sound, or an elbow or a punch, it's just can't believe how satisfying. There's probably something deeper in the human mind where we just like that satisfying violence. But dude, the UFC 309, I'm looking at it. I know it's going to be good when I kind of know some of the people. Like I mentioned Michael Chandler. I didn't even realize he's on it.
Yeah, he's fighting Oliveira.
Yeah, I know. This card's crazy, actually. When is this? I don't even know when this is. Oh, November 16th.
Yeah, I'm pulling up the schedule right now.
Is this probably the biggest one until say John Jones and Stipe weren't fighting? Is this like the biggest one probably until then, until like November 9th or 16th?
The card I'm most excited for is UFC 308. That is, and
Really?
I think
Wow. I know what we're going to
MMA
talk about in November then.
Yeah.
We're going to have a lot to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, the title fight, I saw this one post on X. It was like, this is a fight that I would miss my own wedding for, when you see Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway. I mean, Ilia Topuria, when you talk about a dominant, somebody who has the potential to be a dominant champion, Ilia Topuria fits that bill. I mean, he crushes people. 15-0.
Are they both champions, or is it just their picture? Like Holloway and how do you say this dude's name?
Ilia Topuria.
Are they both champions, or is it just
Max
their
Holloway
picture?
is a former champion?
Oh, okay, so it's just an old. On the Google search, I just put in UFC 308. They both have like belts in their little circle.
Max Holloway. Yeah, Max Holloway is the current BMF champion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's like one of those things where originally when it first came out, it seemed kind of gimmicky because Jorge Masvidal, I forget who he even fought. Jorge Masvidal fought for the BMF belt. He won it. He was the BMF champ, and then he never defended it. So it kind of seemed like a one-off gimmick.
Okay.
But when Max Holloway fought Justin Gaethje for the BMF, I mean, did you see that finish with 1 second left? Max. Okay, so it was a 5-round fight for the BMF belt, and it was the Max Holloway pointed at the center of the octagon. Him and Justin Gaethje threw down, and Max Holloway clipped him with 1 second left and knocked him unconscious. And it was the fight that it was like, okay, if there's a BMF champion, like, or a BMF championship fight, it was this fight. Two dudes who know how to throw. And a lot of people were thinking Gaethje was going to win that. But I mean, Max Holloway, it was at the end of the first round. I think it was a spinning back kick. I think broke Gaethje's nose, and that really affected the rest of the fight. But now they're saying that Max Holloway is going to be defending the BMF belt. Now, I don't know how this works. I don't know if Ilia wins. Does he keep his championship belt and then get the BMF belt, or does it have to be a BMF fight? Like, I don't know how they're going to hash that out, but I think they're trying to make it less of a gimmick and more of a, we're going to try to put together fights that fit that bill, like bad motherfucker fights.
There's not a lot of losses when I'm looking at UFC 308 between like everyone on this card. How do you think, like, when someone's totally not getting tested in like UFC, because that's a big problem with like just traditional wrestling right now. It's hard to make cards because the tippy top of America just isn't like, they just like some weights, the second or third guy can't even compete with the first guy, and it wouldn't be entertaining. So what do you think goes into it when a guy just isn't tested in the UFC and trying to like book them their next fight? Like, how do you think it was hard to convince Holloway to fight him? Or like,
I don't think it's hard to convince Holloway in specifically to take anyone. I mean, that guy is about as game as they come. But when you have somebody, if you look at the co-main event on that card, it's Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev. Chimaev was one of those guys where it's going to be hard to get him a fight. Now, again, Robert Whittaker, he's another one of those guys. He'll take that fight, and he'll fight anybody.
I watched Chimaev's last. What was his last big win? We were just talking about him. He just
I think he beat, was Kevin Holland his last fight?
Didn't he beat Oliveira, or am I way off on that?
No, he didn't beat Oliveira.
I'm thinking
he beat no, it was Usman.
Oh yeah, that's
it.
Because different O name. I was thinking different O.
He beat Gilbert Burns, then Kevin Holland, and then Usman, I believe.
Or Usman doesn't even start with an O. Wow, I'm really.
You're good.
Oh well, I'll leave that in. I won't cut that, I promise. Who's this Magomedov guy? 14-0. Is he another Russian? Man, the Russians are. I feel like they've always been around, but they starting to take over more now.
Did you say you said Magomed Ankalaev? Is that who you're talking about? The guy fighting Alexander Rakic?
No, he's fighting this Armin Petrosanin.
Sure. Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm looking at the card now. Yeah. So most people refer to him as Shara Bullet. That's normally like his nickname that people call him. So, but yeah, Shara Putin Magomedov. Yeah, Armin Petrosian. He is a Contender Series alum. He has knockout power. You know, he could really knock people out. Magomedov, Shara Bullet, he is a striker, and he's really slick at striking, has really good kicks. And I forget what it was. I know he faced a little bit of criticism in his last fight. I forget what it was about. I think maybe it was like not going forward when he should have. I forget what it was, but I mean, he is undefeated. I think this is his third or fourth fight in the UFC.
So he's kind of like in a Bo Nickal spot. We're trying to see like if he's made up for a top spot.
Yeah, like Armin Petrosian, he's no slouch, but he's also not like he's not a ranked guy. He's not what you would consider top level competition at that division, but he's had enough fights in the UFC that he's proven himself that he is a UFC caliber fighter. And I think it's going to be a really good matchup because it's one that I could see Petrosian take that fight. But at the same time, it's a great stepping stone for Magomedov if he wants bigger fights in the rest of this year and the next year.
Sweet. Yeah. I'm even kind of getting excited. 308 and 309. I mean, I'll have to find ways to watch it, but I'll slowly start getting back into it. Rome wasn't built in a day.
That's right.
But tell me about the contender series. At the time of filming this, it would have been yesterday. I actually did do a little bit of tell me just kind of how it works. Like when I'm sure it's skill based, but so say you're an upcoming fighter and you're really good. What kind of makes you think Dana White say, all right, this is contender series, let's see how he does? And then some people are like, all right, let's just put him right into a UFC undercard. Like what's
right,
like the whole point of the fighter?
You're saying like what's the difference between the people who just get signed to the UFC and people who have to earn their contract on the contender series?
Yeah, besides like I mean obviously it's probably skill. Like there's a lot of skill and some are just more unknowns, I'm sure. But tell me just I guess a little bit more about the Dana White contender series.
So what it's really for is, people who just get signed to the UFC, more often than not, they have a bunch of fights in other high-level promotions.
Like they come from Bellator over or something?
Right, yeah. Like if their contract's up with Bellator or won championships or PFL, they'll sign with the UFC. They're not going to put them on the contender series. But what you'll often see is people who have a lot of good fights on the regional scene, still professional fights, but, lower-level regional promotions. If you have it's your chance to prove yourself against somebody of a similar skill set who's in a similar situation. Sometimes you'll see like discrepancies in records, like you'll see somebody with a lot more experience fighting a relatively newer guy, but sometimes that's what makes for the best fights. But you have like promotions like Uriah Faber's A1 Combat out of Sacramento. A lot of fighters who perform well on that get that contender series shot. Like one of my favorite fighters, Peyton Talbot, absolutely tearing it up in the UFC right now. He had an impressive win on contender series, and it said, and he didn't get a finish. All of his fights in the UFC so far have been finishes, but on contender series it went to a decision. But he was so impressive that Dana White still gave him the contract. Normally, if you go to the bell on contender series, you have to have a pretty damn good fight if you want a contract. And he proved that, but that's mainly what it's for. Like you'll see a lot of lower records, like a lot of guys who are 5-0, 6-0, or like 7-1.
So really like the unknown factor is what it's for.
Yeah.
I actually did do a little bit of research on this one before we started, just looking up. So there was they normally only have like 5 fights.
Yep.
Okay. That's it.
Yeah, just 5.
Oh, wow. The one dude who got knocked out really fast, Bailey Schoenfelder.
Yeah, he got a rear naked choked, I believe, in 1 minute and 13 seconds.
Nailed it, dude. Yep. But he was kind of a wrestler.
You're familiar with him?
It sounded super familiar. No, I wasn't. It's just that name sounded familiar. It was just weird because he played football at Minnesota.
Yeah.
But he was like a South Dakota high school state champion or something.
Okay.
So yeah, went to a good wrestling school, but played football there. So I was like, but that wasn't what I was thinking it was from.
That dude that beat him, I don't know what he closed at, but I think he opened at a plus 420 underdog. So when you have,
he was not supposed to win.
Yeah, no, that was his fight to lose, or I don't know how that phrase would work. It's his fight to win. The other guy's fight to lose, right?
Yeah.
It would be the favorite's fight to lose.
Oh, Ukrainian guys from Ukraine too, 24.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, isn't it crazy when you watch these sports that you've grown up your whole life where everyone's older than you, and then all of a sudden, like he's younger than us, and he's doing this stuff.
I think about that in the NFL all the time because I remember being a kid watching the NFL, like, look at all these adults, and now I'm like, oh, like half these players are younger than me now.
Dude, it hit me hard with the NBA draft my sophomore year of college, because a lot of those kids go to the college for a year and then leave for the NBA. And they're like, and this kid's 18, drafted into the NBA. And I was like, holy cow, I'm like 20. Like, this is crazy. And then it only gets worse is the crazy part.
Yeah.
It only gets worse. So I guess we'll transition into some wrestling stuff for some of the wrestling fans. So a big event that's coming up this weekend for us on Sunday is Who's Number One. Have you ever heard of the Jiu-Jitsu Who's Number One? I think that's what it is. Yeah, so Jiu-Jitsu has a thing called Who's Number One by Flow Sports, which does like a lot of
I'm familiar with Flow.
Yeah, it does a lot of sports that aren't like it does football, but it's mostly like high school or a couple college games, like a UConn was on there before or something. But wrestling does it, and it's basically like the number one high schooler versus the number two high schooler in the country. So there's some huge ones. Like the main card, there's this kid, Bo Bassett. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's this huge high schooler coming up. He's kind of revolutionizing the game. Like obviously with NIL, the bigger your social is, the more money you can make even quicker.
Right.
To get sponsorships. And he's been doing this since he started high school. So he has this huge following of just following his wrestling career. And last year he kind of was unconventional and decided not to cut weight and kind of got smashed against this dude named Daniel Zepeda. But the twist is throughout all last year, Bassett like started getting up to the weight, actually filling in the size. And then he actually like outplaced him at world team trials for high school kids and the US Open and everything. So now there's a lot of talk that like he got smashed and now he's a lot better than that dude. And that's like the main card. So it's Daniel Zepeda versus Bo Bassett. And it's getting a lot of talk in the wrestling community.
How do you watch this?
It'll be on Flow.
Okay. Sunday. So is that like can you download that app on like Xbox?
Yeah. I don't know if you can. So my Xbox almost like caught on fire like a year ago. So I'm pure Fire Stick anymore. But
okay.
Dude, I'm really thinking about getting it again because I just see all these clips of NCAA, dude, and I'm like, because I wasn't really much of a gamer past couple years anymore,
right?
But not 2K, NCAA is really making me want to get back into it.
Yeah, I never really was into like college football games. I mean, especially when they stopped making them. You know, like I wasn't heartbroken because I never really played them anyway. But I am out of my 4K player broke. My Xbox Xbox
Is that like
One
to record
X.
the games? Like what's the 4K?
Oh, like for a 4K Blu-ray, instead of just the regular 1080p. My Xbox got fried. It was like a surge. I didn't have it plugged into a surge protector. I don't even know what happened. It was such
this sounds like what happened to me. Like because when I like got rid of it, like I just destroyed it. Just I don't know, just something fun to do. Destroy it, like it's not working, and like the whole like metal part of it was black, like it caught on fire for a second. And I was like, man, because my wife was just like, hey, the Xbox isn't working. Like couldn't watch Netflix this morning. And I was like trying to fix it. I had to have unplugged the damn thing like 6 times. I was like, I think this thing's done. Like, it kind of made me miss the red ring of death because at least then you know when it's dead. Where this one I had no idea. But whatever. But go on, your 4K player died.
Yeah, so right now the only thing that I have is my 2013 Xbox, which is still kicking. Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's a little the disc drive doesn't always work. Sometimes it takes a few pops, but you know, it's still kicking. But so I'm in the market for a 4K player. So along with that, I'm looking at a Series X. And the reason I brought this up was because I want to play NCAA football.
Yeah, dude. It's just, it looks amazing. Like I've never seen a game like it. And I watched this one dude on YouTube who like rebuilds teams in it. It's more just to listen to and like learn some things. But even that, like I'm getting into Let's Plays again. Haven't been in that for years. So this game's just like, it looks so awesome. And they're saying it's so much better than a Madden game. Right. But this is one thing. And then I'll move to my next question. This is for the younger people listening that talk to their friends on Xbox and PlayStation. Don't take that for granted. Cause I miss doing that with dudes like Josh and everybody all the time. Sometimes I'm like, I'd give anything to be having Xbox night where we're just talking about probably the most vile things high school and middle schoolers can talk about. But I miss that stuff. But speaking of Blu-ray, for those who don't know, another fun reason I also wanted to start this podcast was just connect with Josh again, but also get back into movies and everything. And for those who don't know, Josh watches on average at least one movie a day. Sometimes I feel like it's 3 movies a day from following him on Snapchat and everything. But Josh, what are some good movies you've watched recently for the people out there?
One of the best movies that I've seen recently, and when I say one of the best, I mean this film can go like pound for pound with some of the best films I've ever seen. It's from 1967. It's called The President's Analyst with James Coburn. Such a fascinating concept. This psychoanalyst gets selected to be the president's psychoanalyst. And at first, he's thrilled, like, oh, what an opportunity.
Yeah.
But then the stress of being the president's psychoanalyst and everything that goes into that, like security wise, drives him crazy.
Is it is it based on a true story? Or
no, not that I know of.
So is the president even like, are they pretending to be a president or no? It's like,
funny enough, the president is never on camera, never on screen.
Oh, wow. They don't even say who it is.
I think I forget if they say his name. At the time, would it have been,
what year was it?
67.
Oh, geez.
Is that, I don't want to say a name and sound like an idiot. So,
yeah, I don't even know. That's bad, but whatever.
Is it LBJ? Is it Lyndon B. Johnson?
Yeah, Johnson.
Okay.
Yeah, Lyndon B. Johnson. There we go. All right. Yeah. But anyway, go ahead.
Took a little calculated risk there.
No,
but yeah, so it was one of those. You've seen Austin Powers.
Yeah.
James Coburn, the actor in The President's Analyst, he was in 2 other movies called Our Man Flint and In Like Flint. I think from 66 was Our Man Flint, I believe. But they were the original Austin Powers films. And I haven't seen them yet. I own them, but I haven't seen them yet. But The President's Analyst is that kind of movie. It's like a comedy.
Oh, really?
But so it's that kind of film. If you're imagine Austin Powers, but in the 60s, it's like that style of comedy.
Wow, and that's pound for pound, do you think? One of your favorite movies?
The President's Analyst, like I watched American Psycho. I've seen it a bunch of times, but I watched it recently a few weeks ago. And when I watched The President's Analyst, I'm like, I liked that movie more than American Psycho, and I really like American Psycho.
Wow.
So yeah, that was one of the better ones that I've seen recently.
Wow, that's crazy. This might be a little psycho, but I'll say it. I mean, that's what podcasts are for, release secrets. But dude, lately when I've been getting a little, so I like watching YouTube or whatever when I go to bed, or sometimes just depends. And lately when I've just been getting a little tipsy, probably beyond the point of tipsy, like brownout territory. Dude, I like just watching American Psycho, which is really weird. my wife said she came to bed once and it was just blasting during the chainsaw down the hallway scene, and I'm just snoring and it's on, and she's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, I don't know. Just whenever I'm in doubt, I just put that on, even if it's pitch black in my room, which, dude, I just love that movie. Every time I watch it, there's something new. I've read and watched a lot of videos on it, which is when you really know you like a movie, when you want to learn more about it. But gosh, it's just so interesting. Have you watched, you watch any shows? Do you have Netflix or anything?
I have most of the streaming services. I haven't watched a show since Severance, and I've seen the first season really twice. Good. Incredible. I watched the first season twice.
Oh, I mean,
wow. It's a really good show. And because of the writer's strike, the season 2 got delayed quite a bit, but I believe it has a 2025 release date. So we're getting close.
Oh, awesome. I only brought that up because there's a new show Casey and I are watching about the Mendez brothers that like killed their parents. Mm-hmm. And the one dude who plays Lyle Mendez, sometimes I'm watching, I'm like, he's so trying to be like Christian Bale. But it's good. I mean, he's really good at acting, but I'm like, sometimes I'm like, did Christian Bale just say that from American Psycho? If you ever watch it, you'll know exactly like, there's just some scenes where it's like, man, what was that? What's like a bad movie you've watched recently?
You know what? One of them that was pretty goddamn bad was a movie. I think it's from 1984. It's a New Zealand film called Death Warmed Up.
Death Warmed Up. Is that the translation of it, or no? No,
I think that's the original title.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it is. That was a stinker. And there are plenty of films, plenty of films that are so bad that they're good. Like American Hippie in Israel from '72. It's known as one of the worst films of all time, but you put it on and almost anybody can enjoy it. I mean, it's so stupid that it's like fun to watch.
What is that movie called? American Hippie from Israel?
Yeah, an American Hippie in Israel.
And it's from 1972?
Yeah.
Dude, I can only imagine
it's a wacky movie.
Oh my God.
But that's an example of a film that's so bad it's good. But Death Warmed Up, it was just one of those films where after I watched it, I was like, it had some strengths. It had some really good shots in it. Like there are some, like, if you took a shot as like a still photograph, you'd be like, oh, that's a cool picture. But in general, the movie was just not really that enjoyable. And it takes a lot for me to not like a film. And I wouldn't even go as far to say that because it's hard. It's like, did I really not like it, or did I?
We have the same. We talked about this a long time. We have like the same perspective on movies because we used to make them and everything, and still are involved in it. But I know we have the same perspective. Like even a terrible, bad, like so bad movie, we still find. We never hate it that much just because we know how much work goes into making anything, especially something 90 minutes or longer. Like, I know we have that perspective a lot on movies, but yeah, some movies are still just bad. But
yeah, I watched somewhere in the ballpark of 140 some movies this year so far, and a little. We'll drop this for next time. We'll keep it a secret for now. There's one film that I watched this year that really stood out as unequivocally the worst film I've ever seen.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, it was so bad. And like you said, like we've both been involved in making short films and stuff like that. We know what goes into it. And that's like that's why when I watch a movie like Death Warmed Up, it's like, okay, this is bad, but like, they made it. It's still here. This other movie, which I'm not going to name yet, we're going to save that. The worst movie I've ever seen. We're going to keep that in the bank. But yeah, when I watched it, like without a question in my mind, I was like, that was the worst movie I've ever seen, ever. And
now we gotta do another one.
we'll keep that in the bank.
What's the most movies you've watched in a month? Because I know you keep track pretty thoroughly.
Yeah, in a month, it usually fluctuates between like 12 to 20. October, I'm going for 31. Not going to be able to watch a film every day, so I'm going to have to double and even triple up on some days. Yeah. But I'm doing a lot of trilogies for October. So we have the It's Alive trilogy, the Sleepaway Camp trilogy, the Slumber Party Massacre trilogy.
Oh, Sleepaway, that's like the first two are guilty pleasures. They just dude, sometimes I just get in a mood where I'm like, I just want to watch an old, like, campy ass movie that's just like I can turn my brain off and just kind of enjoy it. I hate when I watch I don't even show those movies to people anymore. I used to show people like Texas Chainsaw all the time, like it's so good, but some people just are in that frame, and it's fine. Some people are just in the frame. If it looks old, it's not great, but oh man, like
selling somebody who doesn't watch black and white films on a black and white film, selling them on that, it's incredibly difficult.
Dude, you see Ed Wood? I think 30 years. No, the movie Ed Wood is like 30 years old at this point.
Oh! I thought you were asking if I've ever seen it. No. When did that? What? 1994?
I guess so. It was here. I saw it on James Rolfe's Twitter or X or whatnot. Oh, you've never seen that movie?
No.
Oh wow, it's a great one. I'd recommend it really heavily.
Who was in that?
Tim Burton, and then young Johnny Depp is Ed Wood. But it's pretty good. I wouldn't say it's like one of the best things I've ever seen, but it's a fun little adventure of a guy making movies, and I mean, pretty bad movies. Pretty bad. What are you at for total movies this month?
This month, I think we're at. I mean, I could check. I think we're at 13.
Okay. Oh, that reminds me. You say you're going for 31 in October. For TrueTan Wrestling fans, I'm trying to go for 31 shorts in October.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm trying to just kind of come up with different ideas, and then I actually have a horror movie like kind of like 1 month, it's every short is like something different, and it just like escalates to getting creepier and creepier and weirder.
Okay.
It's for like something in the wrestling community. I'm sure some people might be able to figure it out, but I might have to save that for a couple months down the road. But I've already started brainstorming that. There's this thing the wrestling community does, but we'll talk about it when that month rears around. But
I just checked. We're at 14 this month.
oh yeah.
Yeah. So we're,
and the best one's been that one that's like Austin Powers.
Yeah, the President's Analyst. That has topped the list of September so far. American Psycho was number 2 for September.
Yeah.
Yeah. Number 3 was an interesting one. It was a documentary about an artist from 1994.
I love documentaries.
Yeah, it was one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. It was called Crumb. About Robert Crumb. Yep.
Oh, Michael Crumb?
Robert Crumb.
Robert Crumb. I think Michael Crumb's one of my father-in-law's friends. But anyway. What was like his, like, what kind of art form was it?
He was like a comic book, like cartoon illustrator, but he was known for like, he has his like, there's like controversies about his art. Like it's like overtly a lot of things, but he was
best documentaries controversy.
Oh yeah. And it goes into like what makes an artist like that. And it shows like his brothers turned out to be like not the most desirable people of society.
Yeah.
And I think what they used that as, it was like Robert Crumb could have easily been these people, but he channeled his weirdness and whatever else you want to call it. He channeled the upbringing into making art that resonated with a lot of people, that gave him the ability to just exist how he is, you know, and in a way where if he didn't do that, he would have just ended up like his 2 brothers, which is not where you want to be in life.
That sounds interesting.
I don't want to give too much away. Yeah, watch the film. It's incredible.
What was it? Did you buy it or stream it? Oh,
yeah, okay. I bought it. It's on Criterion.
Okay, nice.
I'm not sure if you didn't want to buy it. I don't have the Criterion channel. I mean, if I'm going to watch a Criterion movie, I'm just going to buy it. But
yeah,
if you, it might be on the Criterion channel. Okay. If you wanted to stream it.
How much do you on average spend a month on Blu-rays? I'm always curious. Don't want to disclose that info.
Yeah. It might for my own sanity. It might be best not to say that number out loud.
That's all right. What's the collection up to? Blu-rays.
It's been a while since I counted, but we're actually, I don't even know. I haven't counted in so long. I know we're at like probably a little less than 1,000.
Oh, wow.
Give or take.
Heck yeah, dude! Special show when you break 1,000 Blu-rays. So you gotta count them up. You gotta count them up, dude.
Yeah, I'm looking at the shelf right now, and like the shelf is filled, but there's like different sections of the room that just have like stacks of Blu-rays in like order that I want to watch them, or like I want to watch these alone, I want to watch these with certain people. Like
I was just about to ask that. How's it like? That's how you organize the Blu-rays and everything?
So on the shelf, they go by label. So like all my Criterions are in order, all my Vinegar Syndromes are in order, all the like Scream Factory, Arrow, like
so it goes off of like who made, like the production company, is that what you call it?
Yeah, the label.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. And then there's a bunch of non-label Blu-rays that they just go in alphabetical order.
Okay. All right. But yeah, man, I think we did it. What do you think? Dude,
this was so fun. And it went a lot smoother than you would think for like a first episode.
Yeah, I think we're both curious people, and I think some episodes like today, I was just really curious about UFC, and then obviously in the wrestling world, all that's happening is who's number one. So as more stuff happens there, and different things, I'm sure some episodes will be more wrestling heavy, some will be more movie heavy, some will be again more UFC heavy. Some we might not get into any of it and might just bullshit the whole time, but that's just all part of it. I just wanted to get back in touch with you, and I thought there's no better way than this. But
perfect.
I think we did it, dude.
Yeah.
I guess I'll see you next week and see everyone else next week.
Sounds perfect.
All right.